The focus we have this morning on rising food costs, and boy, it is getting expensive to buy groceries, isn't it? Surging prices forcing South Africans to make some very tough choices, many cutting out luxuries and even moving to cheaper brands. But for the poor, it means leaving out some basic necessities. Let's speak to the Social Policy Initiative Executive Director. It's Isobel Frye. There's Isobel. Morning to you. Isobel, always good to have you on eNCA. We need to talk about the poor as well. It's one thing to talk about the rest of us who are fortunate enough to be able to cut back on the luxuries, but some people don't have luxuries to cut back on. This is pure survival, isn't it?
Absolutely, Gareth, and thank you very much for having me on your show. I think that it's important to have this conversation, and I think it's important to realize that this is not just a theoretical debate, but for many people, it is the difference between being able to go to sleep with food in their stomach and wake up knowing that there is food certainty for tomorrow. I think what we're seeing, especially with the school holidays having just come to an end, is that many households have been facing starvation on a daily basis.
So how do we begin to assist those who are so below the breadline they don't have the luxury of putting some money away to simply buy bread? That's the sort of situation we're dealing with. Who needs to help them, and how do we start?
Yeah, and there you've hit the nail on the head, because I think we need to acknowledge it needs to be a multifaceted response, that we are facing a starvation crisis and we need to assess who can do what. So what I indicated beforehand, tomorrow the schools go back, so we can be looking to the schools and the state to be providing school feeding for children. And we need to see whether those school meals can be ramped up, recognizing that it might be the only meal that the child has during the day. I think in addition to that, looking at social grants are the most direct mechanism for getting food money into poor households. So the state needs to look and see whether there can be a top-up of that in order to ensure that we are addressing starvation. In addition to that, an important player are the food retailers. We know that throughout COVID, the one sector that was posting profits in terms of their sort of annual returns were the big food retailers, ShopRite, Checkers, USave, etc. Now, I think that the state needs to be meeting with the heads of these retailers and asking what kind of food subsidization can be developed for food basics. Many social grants are paid directly through to some of the large retailers, and surely there can be a discounting of basic maize meal and oil, etc., because we know that in addition to the food prices, the fuel prices, we're looking at food shortages, which of course makes the price of food go up. So what I wanted to say as well is we need to be looking at how we substitute for food imports in this country, whether we're encouraging all of us to start growing some food basics. This is basically a sea change. Food supply is never going to be restored to what it was. So those are the interventions. But I think that looking at who can do what. So the schools definitely, food retailers, cash grants, and then looking at how we look forward to what's going to happen when an ongoing food increase and also the taxi increases, which happened a couple of days ago. Gareth, I spent the weekend at a place called Kraskop up in Mpumalanga, and 2 weekends ago there was a shutdown in that town, and rocks were hurled at people trying to go in and out. When I spoke to a couple of locals and asked what they were trying to achieve through the lockdown, there was no sense of direction. People were just angry and hungry and scared.
And it's going to come down to making them feel safe and getting the basics of food to them. Where would you need to get the support? Where would you pin the problem as to who needs to try and help with this? Is it as high as the president? Is it a minister? Is it a council? Help me understand who needs to phone Isobel Frye after the show and go, "Hi, Isobel, saw you talking to Gareth. How can I help?" Who is that person?
Well, I think that you've identified one of the challenges, and that is one of the reasons why people are scared is because there is no leadership that is coming forward and saying, we hear you, we see you, we are going to solve the problem collectively, and this is what we're going to do. Effectively, here is my number, here is the hotline. So I would like to see the president calling together a council, looking at the churches. We know that churches are important not just for spiritual guidance, but also because they have a footprint in every part of the country. looking together at ways in which schools could be used to be sending through the message. But there's basically been a silence in terms of people being told that a plan is being devised. People don't need a perfect plan, but people need to know that they're being heard and that it doesn't have to come down to burning and looting in order for a solution to happen. And I think that as we go to the run-up of the ANC policy conference, now is a perfect opportunity for people in a bipartisan way to reach hands across and say, this is what we need to be doing and this is how we can do it. There are solutions. When we have shortages of water, we have water trucks. We can look at food parcels, the kinds of packaging of basic foodstuffs. But we need to recognize, and this is what we started by saying, that this is a crisis and it's only going to get worse. So how are the different levels of responses being geared up? And certainly what we shouldn't be doing is saying, let's bring in the army in anticipation of looting. Hunger is not a crime, but lack of addressing of that hunger is a crime.
We'll end it there. What a way to end it as well. Isobel Frye, thank you very much indeed. There were wonderful initiatives during COVID-19. It's amazing what can be done if everyone does work together. Isobel Frye, I appreciate your time. Social Policy Initiative Executive Director, joining us on eNCA. 25